Hey everyone, welcome back to Make the Music. I've got Velvet Year Seth Goodwin with me today. Very accomplished producer, has an amazing channel. If you haven't seen his content, hit X on this video and go see his content, and then come back to this video, okay? But he's on with me. He does indie pop producing. I'll let him introduce himself. He can probably do it better than I can. So why don't you just give people a quick introduction of who you are?
Yeah, thanks, man. My name is Seth. I produce music under the name Velvet Year. I specialize in indie pop, so very guitar adjacent music. And I specialize in sort of remote online production, so people will send me their song ideas remotely. I have clients that I'm working with that are in LA, a couple in Singapore, Toronto, Canada, just all over the world, and we'll work on their song remotely through like Zoom sessions, and I'll get their track produced and mixed and mastered to a point where they can just upload it to Spotify.
That's freaking awesome. You probably got, probably many people watching, even me, that, I'm jealous of that. And you're going to go into also that there's pluses and minuses to every career, but on the surface, that sounds pretty freaking cool. You just get to chill in your studio, make tracks for people, and get paid for it, which is also really nice. Why don't you...
That level of oh man, this is awesome, to oh my gosh, this is so much work. It's like a dynamic wave.
Sure.
Some days you do get to be like, man, I've literally cheated the system, gotten people to pay me to make music all day. And then other days you're like, oh my gosh, I need to bounce out so many stems today. And there's literally mathematically not enough time to do it today.
Well, I think what they tell people is find the sweet spot between your passion, and what can make you money. And you've definitely found, it's not going to be 100% fun all the time. It's not going to be nothing is like that. No career is like that. So why don't you give people just a quick overview? How'd you go from just a dude, learning about recording to now you're getting paid to make people's tracks? What was that transition like? How did you get there?
In hindsight, it was a lot of work, but it just it was more so the result of a lot of things just kind of being in place. So I was always I got to a point where I learned a lot of individual instruments like guitar and drums and keys and things like that. And I liked them, but I was taking music lessons for all of them. And I got to a point where I'm like, I don't really care about getting better at these. With music education in terms of instruments, it's always okay, you're at this level. Now the next thing for you to do is get better at your proficiency level with that instrument. And I was just I was honestly kind of depressed because I'm like, man, this has been my life for forever, and I do not care about getting better at my sweep picking or my double bass, because I just do not care.
We've all been there.
But then I discovered songwriting and specifically producing. So I got Reason, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I can make my own songs.
And then you realize how bad you are at it.
For a long time, I lost my hard drive that has all of my old Reason projects on it, and for a while I was like, oh man, I'm really bummed out. But I'm like, okay, I actually destroyed the evidence. Now nobody can hear them. And but yeah, no, you realize that there are different skills that you use when you're making songs and when you're building tracks that are not really developed when you're just okay, I'm going to get proficient at this instrument. And so I just dug straight into that and stayed there for years and made a bunch of connections with people just because all I cared about was okay, I'm not playing video games anymore. My fun chillax time is I'm gonna download a Katy Perry a cappella vocal, throw it into a Reason session, and make my own backing track underneath this vocal that's pre-existing. And honestly, for a lot of people, I still recommend doing that because it's great practice to be okay, here's a song, it's finished, but the only thing that's there is melody and structure and arrangement. And so you'll find out really quickly, it's oh, okay, there's multiple things that you can do to sort of push stuff in different directions, and you can take the same song and make it a metalcore cover, or completely change the progression and make it an IDM jazz electronica song, and do that with the same thing. So I did that for a long time. And then there was this dude local in Edgewood that I was just friends with. And had been doing stuff together for forever. And I think at this point we've written like 500 songs together.
Oh,
and
wow. Wait, can you repeat that number? 500?
Yeah, we were kids and we didn't have anything else to do in Washington, so I would just go over to his house and we would just work on a song. And I think at the time it was like Memphis Mayfire was like the thing that we were obsessed with.
Nice.
So we would do like a Memphis Mayfire ripoff song, and then we would finish it and then move on to the next one and be like, oh man, I heard this Periphery riff. That sounds really cool. And we do a really crappy version of that. And then we find like some country song. It's like, dude, the lead line of this is actually kind of cool. Let's make something like that.
Nice.
So we did that for forever.
It's like you want to know why people or why grunge music is a thing. Come live in Washington for a year and you realize how much time you have indoors to yourself.
Only music that actually encapsulates like the aesthetic or feeling of like being physical.
No, totally. Like I listen to all styles of stuff, but it'll be, mid-February and it's 38 and raining. And it's like, let's throw on some Alice in Chains. I'm feeling it right now.
That's the Nevermind stuff. You're like surprised when you listen to it now, and you're like, man, this has aged incredibly well.
Yes.
And like Seattle has not.
And Seattle is not, exactly. Well, that one thing I love about your channel that you kind of touched on there, that I feel like our channels are a little bit kindred spirits, is covering songs is like the fast track to getting good at producing, in my opinion. Covering and then nailing the production 100%, not getting kind of close, but like I do this on my channel as well with Match the Sound, and you do an amazing job with indie pop tracks, is match it like 100%. And if it's not, find out why it's not and fix it till it gets. That's literally like, if there was a secret sauce to getting like good at this thing, to me it's that. I want your kind of opinion on that, but I wonder if you share that thought.
No, I think like you can't really, I mean, that is the skill. Like when you are being paid to be a producer on something, that is the skill that they are hiring. And that's why people hire me based off of the videos that I've made, is because they're like, okay, this dude has displayed his capacity to get from A to B. He wants to get from where he's at to this song from the 1975 with this really weird drum sound, and be like, okay, if you have the knowledge to get from there to there, you basically developed the main skill that you need to like get paid to do this. Also, you grow insanely fast, because when you are straight up like, okay, here is this song that is like really good, that has insane production quality, and then you straight up hold your demo right next to it and you compare and contrast the two, that is where it's really hard to be ignorant of your flaws.
I feel like I've thought all these same things. Like, this is exactly how I think about this thing. We don't delve into the same genres, although I like indie pop. Like, my channel is more, hard rock, classic hard rock focused, but it's like,
I grew up on Megadeth though. So
okay, great.
Stuff very, very well.
Excellent. And I love your diverse, you obviously have a very diverse music library, or palette, I should say. But it's like, when I did a video on Metallica Black Album, and then I A-B'd to the Black Album, it's like, you better get there. You better figure out what's missing, whether it's the bass tone, whether it's the kick drums wrong, or you're a crappy vocalist. Figure it out, and that's gonna get you to people. You play a track, people are gonna be like, okay, you have all the components there.
Yeah, and also I think a thing that's really valuable about it is when you like go through like how people, like classic records that are made, like how do people actually make those? Most of the time they're using language of like other songs that they like they're pulling inspiration. There's a really good book called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, and the whole idea of that book is like, literally nobody is original. If you trace it back to the origin of the idea, every single idea is somehow influenced or originated from someone else. that you heard. So, and when I've been in like really awesome, fun writing sessions where stuff is just going by super quickly, that's how people are talking.
Yes.
They're like, dude, I love that. I literally just jumped off a call with a client, and it was literally like, we're working on a song for him, and he's like, dude, I would love it if we could get like this synth sound from this one snippet of this like Deftones song. Even though we're working on an indie pop track, he's like, I really love the guitar tone from this and like the way that it moves. And we listened to it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, there can be something cool there. And so I made an approximation of it that I felt like would work in the track that we were doing, and he loved it. And you know, nobody who listens to our song when it's done is going to be like, oh, they got that from Deftones.
I like to think of it, it's like a smoothie made out of other smoothies, almost. It's like you have 5 smoothies, and then you make your own, and it kind of comes out in your own way because you're a different human being. And I tell people when they have writer's block, I don't know if you agree with this, no, you don't need to not listen to music and be original. Go put on some stuff that makes you feel a vibe, and then you'll create something.
The best advice for like getting out of writer's block that I've ever had was like, find an album that you've never listened to before from an artist you've never listened to before, and listen to that album all the way through and try to make something that sounds like them, regardless of whether you like it or not.
Yeah. No,
because
that's amazing.
That will literally change the way your brain is thinking about writer's block. Because literally the reason writer's block happens, I think we might have even talked about it.
Well, I've watched one of your videos on this. It's an amazing video. I'll link it somewhere. People should watch it. But you can go into the point.
But yeah, essentially like writer's block is, the core of writer's block is your brain forms neural pathways for things that you are doing repeatedly so that you can go through them faster. So a way you can think about it is like, imagine you have like these like sort of rolling fields of like really tall grass, and you're trying to ride a bike through it. Like if you're you have to put so much effort into like running over all this like grass that's kind of getting in your way. But the more you like go down this same path over and over and over again, eventually that path will just start to clear, and it's really easy to go down, and it will just be this perfect little dirt road for you to go down. And that's why we have sayings like, you know, it's just like riding a bike. It's because if you've learned to ride a bike, you've gone through the process of like tearing away at that field of grass to the point where even if you haven't touched a bike in a long time, you can come back to it and like run through it a couple of times and be like, okay, we're good. Yeah. Because you've formed that neural pathway so that you can do it very easily. The problem is, we are artists, so we're not trying to fully replicate the same process over and over again. We're trying to like generally do the same thing, but then also something that's kind of completely different.
Oh, exactly.
And like our brains are naturally resistant to that. So like if you've ever had the thing where you're like, man, I just keep writing the same song over and over and over again, and I hate the fact that I keep doing it. It's literally because that's how that's how your brain has interpreted, oh, we're in songwriting mode right now, we do this. And you know, that's why you have people who will pick up a guitar and they'll play like the same 3 or 4 chords or 4 songs that they've played since they started learning guitar. They'll just be like, oh, okay, here's these things. And I do the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's why I think I share with people, hey, try writing in different keys. Maybe tune your instrument differently, or find a way to not inconveniently, but maybe change up your workflow a little bit. If it's like, if you always write on acoustic or piano first and then take it to the DAW, start with the DAW and work backwards or something. I don't know what your take is on that, because I don't advocate people like switch up your DAW, switch up everything. It's like, that's just going to make things inconvenient for you. But find ways to maybe cause your workflow to get you something new. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, generally, like, I think what you're talking about is essentially what I would recommend. But like a better like macro sense of looking at that is like, try to force your brain to form a new neural pathway. So that you can do something different. So that's why I recommend people start with music that they've never listened to before. Because there's a feeling when you're a guitar player and you have to sit down and learn a song that you've never, like, I don't know this artist, I'm not familiar with this artist, or even like throwing yourself into a genre that you never play. Like if you've never played salsa music, try playing it, and you will instantly be challenged. You will instantly be like, what are these chords? Why are they voicing things this way? Why is this how the meter goes? And regardless of whether you can like directly take one of those things from it, there might be some aspect about it that you like. You can be like, oh man, I really like the way that there's like this sort of like dun, 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 dun,
right,
dun, dun, like this rhythm that they have. So maybe I can try writing a metal song that has that same like head motion to it.
Already sounds good to me. Maybe this should be
already. You're doing something that is like outside of your wheelhouse, something that is different than what would you write if I just handed you a guitar and I'm like, write me something.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's definitely hitting on exactly what I was thinking. And that's a good, I give you more specifics, but like you said, macro approach to it. I do this with content. I don't know if you do this with content. I'll watch channels I've never watched before and go, that's an interesting editing technique, or that's an interesting transition. Maybe I can apply that in some sort of way. Or like you said, when you learn a song that you've never learned before, you may not directly apply those things, but you might be writing something 5 months from now and go, oh, that was an interesting way they changed keys in the bridge. I'm going to do a similar thing like that, but make it my own.
No, and that's the same thing with like most of the time whenever you see like lawsuits of like pop writing lawsuits of like copyright infringement and stuff like that. I was like, oh, Ed Sheeran wrote this song and it sounds like this song. Or, I guess that's a bad example because he just went through a court case. But like, Halsey, let's say Halsey, she has this song and one of her writers, wrote it and it sounds exactly like this. Normally that's because those people, their environment of like what they're listening to is normally pop music.
Sure.
Those are pop writers and the things that they are ingesting are normally other pop writers. And so, like you said, it could be a thing where they listen to some demo or something like that 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it just kind of buried a little subconscious seed. And it took 3 years for that to like sprout out into something that actually came out in their work.
Well, that's happened to me. I liked your video on songwriting and writer's block because you were like, allow yourself to maybe just let more ideas out instead of safeguarding them. Because I've had old projects where I'm like, I hate this except for this 5% that I did. And then 3 years from now, I'm writing a song or I'm constructing a production and I'll go, oh, there was a really cool little synth piece I made 5 years ago on a project. Let me go pull that and pull it in. And sometimes that happens.
You'll be surprised how often that happens, like the further you get along in your career, because there's also a thing where like when you're very close in time to the beginner stages of when you're like working on stuff, there is also like the embarrassment of like, oh, this sounds like crap. And you're just like, push it away. I don't want to listen to it. And I mean, I made that joke at the beginning, but like genuinely there's some songs where I'm just been like, I'll come back to them later, like sometimes several years later, and be like, what the heck was I doing? This is awesome. When did I make this?
Yeah. Well, sometimes that ignorance helps because you didn't have all these rules in place yet. So you did some dumb stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, what is this kick sound? But then you're like, whoa, that bass line was kind of cool though. I like how I just threw that reverb on it for no reason. That's actually got a vibe.
Yeah, that's because that's the stuff that you can't sort of recapture. Is like, oh man, I'm like, even now, like when I'm picking out a kick drum, I'm like, okay, I've mastered so many records now at this point. So I'm going to pick kick drums that I know are going to be easier to master. And, so like, okay, the low end's tight, the mid range is where I like it to be, the presence is where I like it to be, and all that stuff. Versus like when you're in the intro stages and you're just like, it sounds big, I like it, make it bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like you're doing the naive thing, but then it also kind of leads to like, those interesting, like, almost like avant-garde decisions.
Yeah. Or you discover what a limiter is and you're like, this makes everything better. And then you realize that, okay, we don't need to crush everything like that. But, but you sort of learn how to apply those tools. No, that's amazing. I also want to kind of get into you're doing clients. How did you grow your clientele based off what you're doing content wise and social media wise? How did that all kind of come together for you? When did you get into making videos? I think you probably did TikToks first, right? That's what I kind of gathered.
I started on TikToks first, but I noticed really quickly that they weren't really converting as well, which was interesting because, you know, I had a bunch of cool stuff happen for me through TikTok. I got associated with like Slate microphones and like all
you've quite the following on there as well. I mean, I 20K like, followers or something, I think.
Yeah, I have 2,500 or sorry, 25,000 followers on TikTok. And like I got a connection with like Slate because I did some stuff for them. And so they're like, hey, do you want to do like a mic sale thing for our microphone?
You're like, yes.
I'm like, yes.
Of course.
But what I noticed was from like a business standpoint, like it's very good for validation. It will give you a bunch of little red notifications of like somebody liked your thing, somebody saved your thing, somebody commented. But then when you actually look at like the spreadsheet and be like, oh, nobody is actually like hiring me based off of stuff like this. And that's one thing I would recommend for people if you have like an online business or like a web form that you use to like intake projects. The best thing that you can add is at the bottom of it have a field where it's like, how did you find me?
Okay.
Because then you can track how are people finding me. And what I was noticing was like barely anybody was saying that they found me on TikTok. And so the people who were actually getting all the way down, it's such a marketing term, but down the funnel. Like they weren't actually coming from TikTok versus, you know, I'll speed forward a little bit now. I have YouTube is like my main thing. And I think it's rare to have somebody not say that they found me on YouTube. Like out of like the 120 people who filled out my form in the past year, I think there might be like maybe 8 who didn't find me on YouTube.
Really? Well, I think, and this is kind of almost business aspect leaning, but people go, oh, views. That's what's going to make me the money. And it's like, no, you want the quality. You want the leads is really what you're trying to get. And it's like 5 high-quality leads is better than 10,000 views with 1 lead.
No, legitimately, one of the first videos that I did when I started taking like the weekly recreation stuff a little bit seriously was there was a video of like, I was still trying to figure out like what I wanted to do. So I wasn't strong in indie pop yet. So there's like a Bring Me the Horizon video.
I watched that. That's still a really solid video. I liked it.
Thanks, man. But like I did that video and somebody hired me because they saw that video. And at the time it had like 120 views. And so like, but that project was 1,500.
Wow.
And so like, you really need to stop caring. The best way that I've heard it described is like, you need to stop caring about being a cool person and actually worry about like being a business person.
You know what's cool? Doing music for a living and making money. That's the cool thing. If
you can do it and not give into because people are like, oh, TikTok, I just don't, it's so overwhelming to worry about like TikTok and shorts and reels and all this stuff. And it's like, you don't need to do all of that. You should try most of it, but like you need to also like be tracking stuff and be like, all right, what do I want to achieve? Like first and foremost, what do you want to achieve? And then you try stuff to see if it helps you get to that. And then you track. And if it doesn't, then you cut it out.
I mean, that's just amazing, like life advice almost. It's like you know, try things, measure it, and go, you know what, this is not making my life better, or this isn't making my channel better, or my business better. Like for me, my content, it's mostly olderish artists. TikTok is just never going to be my thing. So I upload my back catalog of YouTube shorts on there. Why not? But it's like I'm not making specific TikTok videos. You know. Obviously, having views, having followers is great. I'm never going to say, no, I don't want views and followers. You'd probably say the same thing, or subscribers. But it's like, you can kill it with your channel. I think you're at close to 7K, basically.
Yeah, I just passed 7K.
You just passed 7K. You're like, I can kill it at 7K. I'll continue to kill it at 12K. I don't need 500,000 followers because your business model is not ad revenue.
Exactly. And like right now, even with such like I would say my channel is more of like a smaller channel. Just because I went to NAMM this year and I did run into people who had like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and you know, I'm not going to mention names, but there a lot of those people that were at like a content party were like stupid stressed out about everything. because their ad revenue from YouTube is like their main driving force.
Man, that's I do not envy that, because YouTube, man, it's not a constant. They're kind of sketchy, you know, how they do things, and give out ad revenue. I think that's a good segue into almost like the life of content creation, and you've talked about the mental health aspects of it, and I think a lot of people just don't know how much work actually goes into content creation. Not that we deserve your money or deserve your views. That's not really the point. But it's like you put up a video and someone bashes you for it because you make one bad edit or whatever. And it's like, dude, you don't understand, like, doing this week after week after week, you're going to make mistakes, really dumb mistakes. I had a video where I didn't sync the audio and video. I didn't have a review process. It just happened. People are like, that's a really dumb mistake. And I'm like, I know, it happens. You put out 300 videos in a year, you're going to screw up. So why don't you just talk about that a little bit?
No, it's something that it's a larger part of the process, again, where you're just like, and because of it recently, I actually like stopped like replying to TikTok comments because it was getting pretty egregious in some places.
Yeah.
You just and I think a better, more healthy way of doing it might be somebody like Nick D, who, for anyone who doesn't know, he's like a really cool like hip hop artist, and his thing is like he's been putting out like a song like every week for like the past 2 years, and it's worked really well for him. And of course, like he'll make a lyric rhyme with itself sometimes. It's like, da 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 da, and the thought of you, da 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 da, the thought of you.
Right.
And
right.
Of course, there will be comments being like, "Wow, you rhymed thought of you with thought of you, A+ lyrics." And he just, in an interview, he's just like, I just replies like, "Hey man, sorry you didn't like it. Hope you like the next one."
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're just, and it's like somebody, and of course the response is normally either like, "Hey man, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I was just being funny," or they'll like delete their comment.
Yeah, exactly.
Or they'll just not respond. And that, I think that's probably the thing that you'll learn really quickly when you start doing content stuff, is when you have like negative comments or things like that, the best thing you can do is just ignore it.
Yes.
Don't respond to them. Like,
I'll usually just say,
doing. Like, I know some people are probably going to be like, "Oh, you've got to like interact with people," but it's like people need to understand like online internet conversations don't count as real conversations.
No.
Like you and me are not having a dialogue in the comments. Like these are sporadic thoughts that you are externalizing via your and I'll notice it too. I'll be like, I'll make a comment on something and I'll be like, "Wow, I would never say that out loud."
It's like I think some content creator said somewhere, like, there's a special kind of person who leaves specifically a negative comment on a YouTube video, which I don't think I've ever done. I don't know, but I don't think I've ever done that. But it's like the people who do that they're special individuals for sure. Maybe have some negative energy in their life that they're letting out. But I just reply with, "Thanks for watching." That's it. But it's like it will take a toll on you if you try and debate these people, because they're not there to have a conversation or debate. They just want to let some negative energy out. And and I just say thank you for watching and I move on, because if you let everyone get to you, it will destroy you.
No, legit, you will have like that was my turning point. Was like I had somebody who was commenting on some of my stuff like he would like go after like multiple posts and like find something he didn't like about it and like make like a really long like multi-thread thing, and I was being stupid, so I'm like, here, let me just try to interact with this dude. And so over the course of the day, I just interacted with him, and I felt worse and worse every time I replied. And like it's like somebody who was like convinced that they were like on a crusade to like take down pop musicians and how they're ruining. It's like, okay, you literally, in that, you don't see me as a person.
Exactly.
You don't, and it's like, I should have just acknowledged that that's where he was at, and also acknowledge, like, if I saw this guy at like a bar and we were just talking and hanging out, we probably wouldn't have an issue with each other. But like, because we are on a platform like this, it is incentivizing us to sort of like poke at each other.
Exactly.
There's a reason why there's like 160 character limit for
Yes.
TikTok comments. It's because they want people to get confused and like go back and forth with each other. And
All
so at
feeds
some
the
point you just have
algorithm.
to be like,
Mhm.
okay, if you're on TikTok and you're sending negative stuff my way, I'm going to respond to it as if you were saying something rude to me in real life. I'm just going to delete your comment.
Exactly.
If it's on YouTube, I'm just going to hit hide user from channel. Not because I don't think you're valuable as a person, but because I personally don't need to deal with it anymore. Like, I don't need you around, and the platforms themselves have given me tools to exercise you.
And there's a fine line, and sometimes it gets blurred between actual criticism and then just people looking for a fight, looking to pick a fight. And it's like when I get a respectful comment that's like, hey, you know, this was good, but you messed up here, and they're right, I'll be like, hey, thanks for noticing that. You know, let's, you know, I'm going to try and fix that in future videos, or that's a good point. But if it's just like, you know, straight up look down the barrel of a gun or something, it's just like, it's not helping anyone. What are you doing?
Another thing that I like kind of try to operate under is never accept unsolicited criticism from somebody who you would never solicit criticism from. So, like, if I wanted to actually get better with my YouTube videos, like if I wanted to get better, I have friends who are editors. I can throw them my channel and be like, hey, actually, like, don't kiss my ass. I want to get actual feedback of how can I make these more engaging? How can I make these better? What are your thoughts? Their criticism I will value. And I am very, and same thing with music. I'll have people where I'm just like, hey, I want this to be at this quality. Don't kiss my butt. I want you to give me honest feedback. And I'm lucky enough to have friends that will give me honest feedback. And in turn, I try to give them the same thing in return. So if I want to get better in my craft, I can do that. So when somebody who I don't know like elevates themselves to being a critique giver, and I'm like, I don't, you can leave a note on a mix that I say, and they're like, oh, the snare's too loud. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what your definition of a loud.
Yeah, on what basis is it loud? Like,
yeah, like, and like, that's the right thing. Like when I'm asking my friend who I've been working with for forever, like, hey, what do you think of the snare? I know his musical background. I know, okay, he grew up with me in the metalcore days. He over-triggered samples like I did. He also corrected the chorus, and we have like a general pop sensibility right now, and commercial pop is where we're living. So when I ask him, hey, is my snare too loud? I know that I'm going to actually get like an actual good response. But like some dude on YouTube, I don't know what you grew up with. How old are you? Did you grow up loving the Saint Anger snare? And like that's your golden standard?
Exactly.
Like I don't know.
Well,
like
you're right.
Your criticism isn't actually helpful or usable for me.
Because music is so, I mean, and you've thought about all these musical philosophy, you know, things or philosophical points through quite a bit. There's so much variation in what can be good in people's opinion. Like I just mastered a track for a song coming out, and I sent it back to the mix engineer, and he's like, it's too boxy. There's too much mid-range in it. And I love a more mid-range approach to the track, but he likes more sub and top, right? And neither is wrong. Both have songs that sound like that. We just have different approaches to it. And so it's like you said, the snare is too loud. Okay, that might be, what you're used to, but it's like, hey, drums are pretty loud today. So it's like, that's just going to be the way it works.
And that's the other, going back to like what we were talking about with like remixing a song, where like you can have a song be a million different ways, and none of them technically are wrong. It's not like there's this one true form of the song that we're trying to get to. It's like, what have we decided we're going to put out right now? So like we have decided we're going to have like a mid-range forward metal track that's very Avenged Sevenfold style, and with maybe a little bit more polish on the top to keep it from sounding like it was from 2005.
Right.
Like, okay, that is what we're going for. And that's like an artistic direction. You're almost like an art director at that point. Like, we're deciding that this is where we want to go. and then all the technical stuff will fall down after that. But somebody can take that the exact same songs and be like, let's go for like a modern, like falling in reverse style, like super produced, high production album where there's like snare samples all over the place, and like this sort of like it's almost like a metal version of like a Marvel movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And like neither, like you said, neither of those are wrong, but those are artistic directions, and the best people to work with are the people who are at the very least understand your direction and where you are wanting to go, and are going to try to help you get that way. And because like a lot of the division is that I've seen creatively, either between mixing engineers and mastering engineers, or just producers and artists or whatever, it's somebody has a very clear creative direction that they want, and somebody else is either doesn't understand it or they're not willing to go with it, or there's something along.
There's a disconnect.
That's almost always the problem.
A little disconnect there that
harkens the issue. The last point I'll just leave on the comments thing is that you can get 100 positive comments, and you work with clients. People like what you do. They pay you a lot of money. And then one negative comment will offset that and ruin your mood. And it's just like, why does this happen?
No, it's literally like I've had, like, I'm not bragging, but I've literally had some people be like, you are the only producer who's ever made my songs feel like me.
Yeah.
And you're the only person I'm coming.
And that's an amazing compliment. That's an
amazing compliment. And guess what? One comment of a dude being like, yeah, the snare sucks. That's what sticks in my mind. Like that client I just talked about, like, the dude gave me his Crunchyroll login because he's like become a friend. He's like, you're the only person I want to come to anymore. And we just chat all the time. And it's like, there's such a richness and a coolness to that. And it's like, that's why I say, like, be like willing to just be like, block comments. Comments,
I'm starting to,
because it will slowly seep into your day-to-day life, to the point where you'll be like hanging out or going to bed, and you'll be like fighting this imaginary person in your head.
No, that's true.
Like, no, the snare wasn't too loud.
No,
but like you're exerting all this energy for nothing. And like again, like, it's not saying that the person who made that comment was trying to be that. Most of the time, people who make those comments don't understand that's the world that you live in. But still, you're just like, okay, cool, nothing against you, but I'm gonna protect myself.
Yeah, the more time I spend on social media land, the more I'm starting to grow towards your approach. You're like, no, this just isn't even worth my time. Just block it out of the mind, and move on. That's gonna be, the best approach for you going forward. You made an interesting point. You did make a funny point. I almost want to get into you with this about how 2000s records sound, because I have some interesting theories about that, because it's such a unique era of music production. But I do also want to get into, I had some notes here. I just want to ask you a specific question about, so when you're working with clients and producing other people's material, what are some of the biggest struggles you have, or some of the biggest disconnects that you have, or I would say challenges, when you're getting someone's art and they're like trusting it with you? What are some of the things that are like, real big challenges?
I think one of them, in a macro sense, one of the biggest things that's like on the forefront of my mind with people is making sure I understand them and where they're coming from. Which, the reason that's hard is because, like, we were talking about like Nirvana or something like that. We're from Washington. We know what grunge sounds like. It's like, okay, we know like the distorted, like, growing up on Nevermind stuff. We know what grunge is. All right. I have this one client who's from Toronto, Canada, and their idea of grungy is like Jonas Brothers. I can literally be like, hey, can we make this guitar a little bit more grungy? And I'll be like, sure. Like, what's an example of like some songs that you like that are grungy?
Sends you Jonas Brothers.
And they'll send me like SOS by Jonas Brothers.
Oh my gosh.
But it's like, it's not about like, oh, who's right and who's wrong, but it's like understanding that like in this person's life, the most grungy thing they listened to was the Jonas Brothers. They didn't listen to a lot of aggressive music. And you start getting into like somebody's like life story, like what was their introduction to music?
Sure.
How do they contextualize certain musical things? And you know, that stuff is really difficult to get down, but that's honestly why for a lot of the projects I'm doing right now, I'm like, okay, we're not even going to open up the DAW until I can get you on like a call for like an hour and just ask you a bunch of questions.
That's brilliant.
About, like, what inspired you when you started working on music? And then we'll get into like specific stuff with this song. It's like, hey, when you wrote this song, where were you? Like, were you at home? Were you on vacation? What time of day was it? How were you feeling that day? And like a bunch of stuff where you're just like, well, why the heck would I want to know that?
No, that's all super important. That's super important.
It's super important because there was, the best way I can describe it is there was this one story that I tell all the time where this dude that I was working with for a long time, we were just not seeing eye to eye on a track. And it was like I was trying to give him what he wanted, but I just wasn't, I felt like I wasn't hitting the mark. And finally we just jumped on a call and he's like, it sounds too orange. It needs to be more blue. And instantly I knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Because, and found out the reason that we were doing the song was because it was like a song that he like wrote just after his girlfriend broke up with him, and they were living together, and so all of his stuff was in boxes, and so he was sitting at a piano in a very overcast day with an apartment with no electricity on, just like making something in the dark. Like, this chapter in his life is closing, and of course our references are like all these happy R&B songs. So I'm making it like snappy. And
no.
all this stuff. But it's like, after all that said and done, him saying it needs to be more blue and less orange, I think the actual change that it made, like if I looked at the actual knobs that I turned after he said that, I think it was literally like, I turned one guitar layer down and turned the reverb on everything up a little bit. But he was instantly like, yes, that.
Perfect. Sometimes it just needs more reverb.
Sometimes it needs more reverb. But it was more than just like, it was like, okay, I understand the story you're trying to tell right now.
Yeah.
I've been trying to tell a completely different story, and now that I'm on your page, we can actually tell the same story. And that's why, like, when you spend time with an artist and like, yo, give me like a Pinterest board of all the stuff that like visually inspires you with this song. You know, give me a playlist of all the stuff that you're listening to right now, like separately, like just stuff you're listening to, unrelated to this song, and then send me another playlist of like what you would like this song to be like. Just like the amount of time you invest into getting to know somebody. That's like there's no replacement.
Well, like when I met you last month, and you know, we talked for a good bit about music production. Obviously we're in a very similar lane. You're more successful, but we're in a similar lane. You know, I feel like you would have a decent idea of, if you worked on a track with me, like I explained to like what I like, what I don't like, what my opinions are. I feel like you would have a way better idea after that conversation about how to produce my track than if you just would have met me, you know, for the first time or something like that.
Just knowing stuff like, all right, you went to an Avenged Sevenfold concert. Like, just right there.
Check
what kind of person goes to an Avenged Sevenfold concert? Because, like, I remember Avenged Sevenfold as being, like, when I walked in to go to see my drum lessons when it was, like, 2009, I would see their tab books for sale in the rack. And, like, for somebody, there's, like, the people who like grew up on that era of metal, it was very specific. It wasn't just thrash music. It was, but it also wasn't like the emo pop stuff.
That's correct.
It was this strange sort of middle ground where, like, yes, it was a little bit more accessible than something like a Megadeth or a Metallica, but also like Slash had M Shadows on his collab album, and it felt right.
Exactly.
And so it's like, so all of those things, like right there, that tells me a little bit of like, okay, if we were to work on a track with you, might be some ways that we're approaching it. We're not just going to go straight thrash.
Yeah.
Probably.
I always tell people, like, my origin of music is I was 10 when Guitar Hero Legends of Rock came out.
Right there.
And I got the game,
Right there.
and that's literally like the origin point for me. You know, that's why I like a little more flashy guitar playing, because like there was kind of a revival of that sort of style. Like it was like this really technical guitar playing kind of came back for a while, because it was all Pantera, post grunge, no guitar solos. I mean, Dimebag's awesome, but like a little more going away from that. And then they kind of had a reprise for that, and I grew up like got a guitar right during that sort of period where that was kind of coming back. And so that's kind of why I got into those bands, because all the Lick Library, all these like channels started putting out how to play guitar videos and stuff. And so
Yeah. Anyways.
So even then, knowing like, okay, as a guitar player, you were drawn to the stuff where the guitar was more complicated.
Yeah.
You say you like stuff, you like listening to like the grungy stuff, but the
I
thing
do.
that made you be like, ooh, I gotta do this,
Yeah.
was when you started getting guitar stuff that was more complicated.
Yeah.
So already there, like
Yeah.
I would know that if I was working on a project with you, it's like, okay, well, we need to spend time getting the guitar tone right.
Yeah.
If we don't spend time getting the guitar tone right, the whole album is going to be not fun.
yeah, because I mean, you can tell by the number of tone match freaking videos on my channel, which I enjoy doing, but are also the best performing, the people like the most, you know, so there's all that combination there. One thing that I do love that you talked about that I'm starting to experience is when I walk into my studio and I go, I'm going to make some music for myself, and it turns into me making a video or me working on a project for, you know, a course I'm working on or something like that. How have you found that divide? Because it's getting hard for me to go into my studio and just make something, and it's like, oh, but it needs to go towards something, it needs to be work. And it's like, when I was in college and I didn't do YouTube or didn't do anything like that, it was just like I get done with my classes and I just spend 3 hours recording, and I didn't care. And so it's like, how have you found that middle ground, just to have some time for yourself to like, hey, you can just do whatever you want?
Yeah, I mean, there is the side of like, oh, I can just do whatever I want, but it's also like people who work actual studios know that you can't just do what you want. You have
Right.
like obligations, responsibilities, and stuff like that. And honestly, you can kind of work yourself dry to the point where like, man, I've been producing for other people like every day for the past 3 months, and I can't even remember the last time I just opened up a DAW session and made something for fun.
Yeah.
And so the best way that I've discovered for me to get things like that done is to just set a schedule for it, like try to do it like maybe first thing in the day. I know for people who I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I know for people who have something like that, it can be really actually motivating in the morning to be like, hey, let me indulge in this fun thing that I'm interested in the morning. And another thing for me is I tend to do it very quickly. So for me, I have like a timer on my desk for like an hour. And so I'll literally just be like, hit that timer. Okay, just make something for an hour. It can be anything. It can be, you know, I saw some drum video and I want to replicate a fill from that and then make a synth pop song underneath that.
Yeah.
Or I'll go for a walk in the morning and listen to a playlist and be like, all right, this song specifically is like kind of touching me today right now in a way that it didn't before. Let me try to make something a la that. So if it's like piano based, I'll start with the piano and like we said, it ends up not sounding anything like that song. It's just that like general like throwing the ball in that direction.
Yeah. I like throwing the ball. I think that's a great metaphor in the correct direction.
You're not like a sharpshooter where you're like, I need to hit it. You're just like, it's over there.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
Over there. It's not over there. It's like generally over there.
It's like at those carnivals where they got like all the basketball hoops lined up and you shoot it and you accidentally land it in someone else's. It's like, okay, I was aiming for that, but I hit something else and that kind of worked out. What I do want to know is like, what are your top 3 or 4 favorite sounding albums? So like maybe not your favorite music of all time, like ranking, but like you're like, I love the sound of this. You know, you just love the kick. You love how it's mastered. I don't know. Do you have a top 3 or 4? Because I do. For me, I have like, I love the sound of these. These aren't my favorite records, but they sound so freaking good.
There's a couple. Let me think. I mean, because there are some that are just like my favorites, like albums. Period. Because, of course, But I think if I had to think of like really amazing sounding albums, I think definitely one of them would be the stuff that Will Carlson has done for Bill Murray. So those are like the best, in my opinion, like the best like high production metal albums.
Okay.
Really good, right? Where it's borderline hyper pop. Like it's so weird, and they'll like be like, okay, let's have our Strat be this main distorted tone, but then layer it up with like an 8-string Meshuggah like riff underneath it. But it's got like a really cool production vibe to it, and because the fidelity of like everything is like really great, because if you get to be like a really good studio in Nashville, you kind of have to be.
Yeah, it's competitive.
It's really competitive.
Yeah. I remember
if I had to pick some other ones, it would basically. I don't really have albums that I like the mixes of. I just have like specific mixers that I really like. So
yeah, okay,
like
sure.
A golden standard would be like Serban Ganea, who has done like 99% of Ariana Grande's stuff. Any modern pop record that
that stuff sounds really good. I have
if you listen, especially if you like listen to stuff in for getting reference tracks, I have Amazon Music as a subscription, because you can stream CD quality directly from the app, and so you can actually like track like a 44.1 version of the song directly into your DAW.
Okay, that's good.
So I've used that for references, and yeah, when you listen to stuff in that quality, and you're like, oh wow, there's like on these violins, there's actually like a breath on top of them that like puffs out a little bit, and you're just like, how do you even get something that detailed? But then also the limiter is at like -6 LU.
Yeah, it's just crushed. Yeah,
super clean. It's super clean, but it's also like the most crushed thing ever. And you're like, how do you do that?
I think like that sound is underrated. It's crushed to all hell, but doesn't sound like it's crushed. That's really freaking hard to do, and people don't give that enough credit, in my opinion. Like, stuff right now is slammed, but it doesn't sound slammed like 2008 slammed, where it's like, okay, I can hear the clipping. Like, we get it, guys. But now it's like, things are still slammed, but they sound better.
Yeah, no, there's that. I actually did a whole course. I took a course with a guy who I actually highly recommend this course to a lot of people. It's EDM mastering for like DJs. I forget exactly,
because that stuff is super slammed.
Yeah, and it's done by Nicholas Roberto Di Lorenzo from Panorama Mixing and Mastering, and he has a lot of stuff where it's like you have to, because with EDM, it's like, man, you've got to like, there's so much.
That waveform is.
It is a duct tape, but you can't make it sound like it's duct tape.
Yep.
You've got to make it sound like it's breathing. And so there's so much stuff where you're like, okay, let's do a little bit of clipping, like 1 dB of clipping. Let's do a little bit of upwards compression to like bring up the body a little bit. Let's really, really know how to dial in attack and release on a compressor for mastering. Like stuff you need to know if you want to even have a chance of. It's similar to like guitars with metal music. Like if you can learn how to mix metal guitars, you can mix any guitar ever, because it's so hard to like make a metal guitar not just the woofiest thing ever or the shrillest thing ever.
Yeah, it can get into that territory real quick. I have 2 takes on mastering. I want to know your opinion. One, when I hear amateur tracks or people's amateur masters or something, 1, they're never loud enough. 2, too freaking scooped every time. Not enough mid-range. I keep telling people over, because people are like, oh, I got a sub, my speakers go up to 25K, and I'm like, dude, it's so scooped, I can't hear anything. It sounds like a subwoofer, and and then and on top of that, you slammed it, but in the wrong way, so it's not loud enough. More mid-range and make it louder, and really adding that mid-range and getting rid of the sub and highs with that Fletcher Munson effect helps get it louder.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that you hit on, like Fletcher Munson, is like knowing that, like, okay, if you boost the low end, it might have the effect of making it seem like you cut some high end. Like, knowing that they're like inversely related. And honestly, like with mastering stuff like that, that's honestly why I recommend most people like get like references.
You have to master with the reference.
Yeah, but just like, even like, okay, you don't even need to do it for every song that you have, but at the very least, go on like HD tracks or something like that, and just buy some stuff, buy some high quality like FLAC files for songs that you know sound good, and just bring them into your DAW and throw them under a frequency analyzer. Like even just like a basic like has waves frequency analyzer, and look at what it looks like. And then throw your track in there and see what it looks like. And you will see like the scoop happen, because a lot of people will they'll see tips like, oh, I'm
taking out muddiness.
I'm taking out the muddiness, but then the thing that people don't talk about, which is like hard to articulate in like audio tips world, is like every negative characteristic, like in terms of like a frequency range, like 500 or 100 or whatever, there's a positive and a negative, because the muddy frequencies are also where you get warmth
and definition.
The harsh frequencies are also where you get your brightness. And so you need to go through and not just blanket be like, okay, negative whatever dB on this because that's the mud.
It's so track specific as well. And well, when someone's playing a track on their phone, which people do a lot, obviously, or they have a crappy car, they're not going to hear anything below 300. So you better have some 500 in there, or your track's going to sound super thin. And it's also super genre specific, because I was listening to the Black Parade the other day. The guitars sound like 8K is boosted 35,000 dB because it's CLA, and the vocals have like a ear piercing 4K, but you're like, this makes sense for this album. It should sound a little annoying. It should sound a little aggressive.
But also, like, things are like inversing each other. So like what you said, the guitars had like a thing at 8K, and the vocals were a little bit below that. So now both of them stand out. Same thing probably with the kick and the bass. The kick is probably cut a little bit in like the 250 range, and the bass might be boosted a little bit there. And like, you're trying to get these things to be balanced. It's almost like when you're cooking stuff.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
If you want something to be like balanced, you probably have like bitterness or saltiness or sweetness or these different flavors that need to be balanced. And the reason that we don't like bad cooking is because there's normally one of them that's like way too loud. So like, oh, I threw a little bit of, I put a little bit of fresh lemon juice on a Caesar salad. Okay, cool. Now it's a little bit bright. It's a little bit citrusy. I squeezed a lot.
Now it's too much.
It's like a lemon.
I mean, if you can't tell, CLA I think is my favorite mix engineer, just because he is amazing at. I mean, I haven't heard a bad CLA record, I don't think, ever.
And that's another dude where he's just like, I know what I use. That dude should be a good inspiration for people. Like, you can just find your process and just stick with your process.
He's an amazing process.
Do small deviations where needed, but like, that dude's been running his vocals through like the same compressors for like, I don't even know how many years.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the one thing I wanted to mention about the 2000s records, because he brought it up, this is what they sound to me. Vocals are super dry. Kick and snare sound like they gave one sample to every mix engineer in 2004 and said, hey, use this for 5 years. And then there's like a lot of 4 and 8K in those records and not a ton of shine. But to me, they translate so well. I'll hear something from 2005 or 6 and go, this still sounds really good.
Yeah, because there was, I mean, my depiction of like that era is because the reason why it probably sounded a lot that way is because they were still like a fresh, like, okay, we're no longer in vinyl world anymore. We are not restrained to the limitations of vinyl, and digital recording equipment became a lot more accessible, and we're not reliant on tape machines or things like that. So now we can have like that high-end 8K throughout the whole record. We don't need to like, because a lot of people, this is a rant, sorry, but
Go for it.
The thing, whenever people talk about like, you know, vinyl sounding so good, and I do like vinyl,
yeah,
they never talk about the restrictions that it imposed on the.
Well, vinyl's about the experience. I don't see it as an audio quality
thing for me.
Which is a great way to look at it. But there are people who try to be like, oh man, digital is so cold and vinyl is so warm.
What are you talking about? You can hear more than you could ever hear.
Yeah, and you're just like, no, it's just when you have I did this because I've talked to people who actually have to master for vinyl. It's like, okay, you can't have stuff be as wide. It needs to be like more mono. You can't have low end reach as low. You have to, as the needle gets closer to the middle of the record, you need to lessen the amount of high end so that the needle doesn't like jump out of its slots.
Interesting.
You can't compress it as much because that will cause it to distort when it's like cutting the actual lacquer. And there's like so many like things that are just like intrinsic to this is how we do music, but like it's actually just like a limitation that vinyl put on that delivery medium. And so that era of early 2000s are like, we don't need to worry about vinyls being able to like skip the needle or whatever. We can have consistent clean high end throughout the whole part of the process. We can have, you know, digital plugins that don't sound completely terrible.
Yeah. Well, I think 2004 onwards for me is a different audio era than 1998 to 2003. That's kind of still a little rough. They're still kind of figuring it out, in my opinion, a little. Doesn't mean there aren't great sounding records. I mean, tons of great sounding records. But it was like, I can tell when things aren't fully worked out yet.
Yeah, it's almost like when you listen to like the original like stereo mixes of the Beatles, and they're like, "Oh, we can pan."
Yeah. Hey guys, a pan pot. Look,
a pan pot. Let's put the main vocal in the right ear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they discover the limiter as a thing, and they're just like, "Great, we can make everything sound loud." You know, in that little era, it's kind of a vibe. It's kind of like, this is cool. At least it's a unique artistic imprint, but it's not how I would do things now. And then I feel like in the mid 2000s, they sort of figured out how, okay, here's how to balance it a little better. But yeah, coming back to sort of the main point, it's like, I think the amateur, just so much top and sub that it's like, pull in a reference, guys. Nothing sounds like this. Yeah, it has a good sounding sub. Yeah, you need to, you know, program your 808s. I don't do.
My main main take on like why I think people do that is because they're following some really bad advice, which is follow your ears.
Especially when you're not trained in what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, like I actually have a friend named John McLucas, and he's doing a bunch of really cool stuff right now. But he's gone on record being like, that is the worst advice you could tell people. Follow your ears.
Yeah.
Because if you have underdeveloped ears, what that trains you to be like is, oh, this sounds bad to me. Cut it out. And like you haven't developed, even like your perception of like your listening space and understanding like, oh, okay, the room I'm in right now has a little bit of a mid-range boost in it. Oh, okay, so things I'm listening to probably should have a little bit more mid-range than I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
And even stuff like that, where it's like when you have a developed ear and you spend a lot of time making records, yes, then you can trust your ear. Like when you're in the middle of like, should I throw the vocal up another 2 dB or should I leave it where it is? Let me throw it up on the back. I'm just going to trust my ears and do it up. Like that's different than like somebody who's just downloaded Reaper and like they've got Pod Farm and Superior Drummer and Shango Bass.
That's gonna be a mess.
And they're like, just follow your ears. They're gonna be like, okay, I frequency soloed the EQ at like 500, and that sounds bad to me when I solo it. I'm gonna cut it all out.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's like no mid range at all in any of it.
That's why I stress so much on my channel. Get the best sound you can at the source that just leaves less room for you to mess it up later. Yeah. It's like, get an amazing sound, find that chain for that amazing sound, and then, you know, continue to recreate it. Because, yeah, like you said, early on, you can't trust your ear. You don't know what anything good sounds like. But the best way to get better at mixing is to practice, one, but two, listen to records critically in your room. Okay, kick is about this loud, vocal sits here, it's got this much brightness. You know, learn what good records sound like.
Learn what good records sound like, and also understand like relative volume stuff. So like know that when you are listening to something on a speaker system that's like really well mastered, really well mixed, and you turn the speakers down to be like almost barely audible, the vocal's gonna seem a little bit too loud.
Yep.
And then when you boost it really loud, it's almost gonna seem like it's not loud enough.
Yep.
Like you're understanding that you can like trick yourself in that way, and that human beings are not like perfect mathematical recreation.
Yes, placebo's totally a thing. I've had mixes where I'm applying EQ moves. I'm like, man, you know, this is getting bright, this is sounding good. I had the EQ bypassed.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my gosh, I just tricked myself into thinking this vocal sounds better. I had it freaking bypassed.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of, if there's been any like good arguments for like why analog setups, like fully analog mixing setups, are actually helpful, is because they're not having you look at a screen while you're doing stuff like that, because you can actually it's actually funny, in Pro Tools, the first version of Pro Tools, I think it had like a blackout version where when you hit spacebar to hit, it would start playing, it would like black out the screen so that you can just like listen.
It's actually pretty helpful.
Yeah, I almost wish that they would have that.
Yeah.
That'd be really nice, because yeah, you can trick yourself visually. I do it all the same time with the vocal editing. I can like see a vocal edit that I've made and be like, oh, I can hear that edit a mile away. But then I like literally I'll like close my eyes and turn my head to the side, and then I like can't hear it at all.
Yeah. Or you come back 2 months later and you're like, why did I obsess over this? No one can tell. You know, no one can tell this. That's why I have a mixing surface. So when I'm getting levels for a mix, I use that, you know, to get levels, just so I'm not clicking, moving faders with the mouse. And I do find that does help with balance a bit. You know, I wish I had $700,000 and then I could buy an SSL console and I could just get over with it. But most of us are not in that ballpark. So anyways, I want to thank you for coming on. I've taken up enough of your time at this point, but that was an awesome conversation. I'm going to leave all the links to, like, you have a web page, you have a YouTube channel, your TikTok. I'll put that all in the links down below. Thank you so much for coming on this conversation. Are there any like last thoughts you'd like to give to people regarding just your work or anything, your personal philosophy when it comes to music?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, man. I would say one parting word, have fun with it, dude. Like the people who are like actually like professionals and like have made the most money out of it, they're almost like they wouldn't care if they made $0 from it. They're just like kids playing with Legos all day long, and they're like, if you can like, so many people are like hyper specialized in things now in terms of like, you know, if you're a plumber or if you're a general contractor, or I'm a lawyer who specializes in X, Y, and Z. And like, man, if you can enjoy like messing with guitar tones for hours on end and not want to like murder yourself, that's probably a sign that you enjoy it and it's fun for you.
Yeah.
And that even on days where you're not having like the best day ever, like, you know, the fact that you would still be willing to, you know, for me, like, I'll work on multiple tracks in a day for clients, and it'll be like stressful work. And I'll be like, oh man, I just need a break. And my break is like, I'm going to go on a walk and listen to music while I go do it. Yeah. And then I'm going to come back and make a track for fun. And it's like that level of just like enjoying the process. That is like an irreplaceable thing that like it is. I feel bad saying I don't think you can teach it. I think it's something that you either have or you don't. You either really, really care about this stuff or you don't. And so if you are feeling bummed out for your snare not sounding that great, just remember that the people who don't take this seriously, they do not.
Yeah. Don't forget to have fun. I mean, we start doing this music thing because we enjoy it and have fun. It can get easy to get pessimistic or feel like you're bad or feel bad about it, and it's like, You did this to have fun. This is all about having fun.
And you know,
Exactly.
awesome.
Thanks for coming on. Like I said, you can find Velvet Year. All the information will be in the description. Go check out his channel, guys, right now. It's so much good content. I've been binging it the last month, and it's already been helping me out quite a bit. So thank you for coming on, and we will see you guys next time.